Olivia Brennan stood in the doorway of her corner office, arms folded, watching the same scene play out for what felt like the 1,000th time. At exactly 5:25, Malik Carter slid his laptop into his bag, stacked his neatly organized files, pushed in his chair, and headed for the elevators. 4 years she had worked in this building. For 4 years he had walked out at the same time every single day like clockwork. Tonight, something in her finally snapped. "Why won't you date?" The words jumped out of her mouth before her brain could catch them. Malik's hand paused on the door handle. He turned halfway back toward her. 4 years, Malik, not once. Everyone talks about it. She heard herself scoff. "What are you hiding?" He faced her fully then. For the first time, Olivia saw something flicker in his usually calm, dark brown eyes. Not anger, not embarrassment. Just a bone-deep exhaustion that seemed older than either of them. "You really want to know?" Her pulse kicked up. She swallowed and nodded. She had no idea that his answer would tear apart everything she thought she understood about love, sacrifice, and what vows actually meant when life stopped making sense. 6 months earlier, Olivia Brennan had walked into Brennan and Associates Financial Group as the youngest CFO in the firm's history. The nameplate on her door, Brennan, felt like both a trophy and an accusation. Her father had built the firm from nothing. At 31, she was supposed to prove his retirement was a strategic transition, not an admission of defeat. The first week, she buried herself in quarterly reports and departmental summaries. Numbers were safe. Numbers didn't gossip about nepotism or whisper that she hadn't earned her seat. Numbers didn't snicker when she walked past. She combed through every department, every team lead, every analyst, looking for patterns that would show her how the machine really worked. That was when she first noticed Malik Carter. His file was unnervingly consistent. 4 years of flawless performance reviews. Not one error in any quarterly report. Client satisfaction scores in the top 3% of the entire company. He was the kind of analyst rival firms tried to steal, and headhunters hunted in packs. And yet, 3 separate times he'd turned down promotions to team lead. 3 times he'd simply written, "Thank you, but I must decline." Olivia called him into her office on a Tuesday afternoon. He arrived exactly on time, never early, never late, and sat with a stillness that made it feel like he took up less space than he actually did. Broad shoulders in a simple shirt and tie, warm brown skin, close-cropped fade, and that steady, unflinching gaze. Mr. Carter," she began, keeping her tone neutral, "I've been reviewing your file. You're one of our strongest performers. So why have you turned down every leadership opportunity?" Malik met her eyes without a flicker. "I like leaving at 5:30, he said quietly. "Team lead would mean longer hours." Olivia leaned forward, genuinely baffled. In her world, ambition was oxygen. Everyone was climbing. Everyone wanted more. Most people would kill for those promotions. "You really don't want to advance?" "Not everyone, Miss Brennan." His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Some of us already know what we're climbing toward." She dismissed him, annoyed by the cryptic answer and what looked like a lack of drive. But his words stayed with her, like a splinter she couldn't quite pull out. What Malik Carter was climbing toward became clear at 5:32 that same evening. He pulled out of the parking garage and merged onto the expressway, driving a route so familiar he could probably have done it with his eyes closed. 20 minutes later, he turned into the tree-lined entrance of St. Catherine's long-term care facility. The nurses at the front desk greeted him with nods that held years of recognition. No one asked him to sign in anymore. He belonged here. Room 217 sat at the end of the east corridor, where the afternoon light lingered the longest. Janelle lay exactly where she had lain for the last 4 years, chest rising and falling in time with the ventilator. Her curls had grown out since the accident, and Malik had learned to moisturize and comb them himself, styling them the way she used to like, pulled gently back from her face. He pulled the chair closer, slipped his deep brown hand around hers, and exhaled. Hey, sweetheart, long day." He gave her fingers a soft squeeze. "We got a new CFO today, the old man's daughter. She seems sharp. Asked me why I don't want to be a manager." He huffed out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "I didn't know how to explain that I already have the most important job in the world." He read to her for an hour from the same paperback they had started before the accident. The edges of the pages had gone soft and worn beneath his fingers. It was some cheesy romance she'd grabbed in an airport once. He never skipped ahead. They were going to finish it together, even if together didn't look anything like what they had planned. At 7 o'clock, he left St. Catherine's and drove to Amara's after-school program. His 8-year-old daughter burst through the doors like a firework that had been waiting all day to explode. "Daddy!" Mr. Peters told the funniest joke about a penguin and a snowman. "Did you tell Mom?" Malik buckled her into the back seat and pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I did," he murmured. She would have laughed. They cooked dinner together, spaghetti with entirely too much garlic, just the way Janelle used to make it. Amara set 3 places at the table, including the empty chair they never moved. After homework, bath time, and one more chapter of Charlotte's Web, Malik tucked his daughter into bed, whispered a prayer over her curls, and turned out the light. He ended the night alone at the kitchen table, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator. On the door, held up by a magnet that said family in fading letters, was their wedding photo. Janelle laughing at something he'd whispered, veil caught in the wind, both of them too young to realize how fragile everything really was. He didn't cry. The tears had dried up sometime during that first year when he realized they changed nothing. He'd learned to save his energy for the living, but he allowed himself these quiet minutes to remember, to honor what had been, to wait for whatever might still be possible. Some promises, he had learned, didn't come with expiration dates. A month passed. Olivia found herself paying more attention to Malik Carter than she wanted to admit. She noticed he always ate lunch at his desk alone. He never joined the clusters of coworkers swapping gossip and memes in the break room. She noticed how easily he sidestepped personal questions, steering conversations back to work with the practiced grace of someone who had done it many, many times. His desk was almost aggressively neutral. No family photos, no trinkets, nothing that hinted at who he became when he walked out at 5:30. The first real crack in his armor appeared on a Thursday afternoon. Olivia was heading to her car when she saw him standing in the parking lot, phone pressed to his ear. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, she just slowed down. "I'll be there in 20, he said, and his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it, worried, tender. "How was she today?" There was a pause. "Did she seem comfortable?" Another pause. "Good, that's good. Tell her I'm on my way." He hung up and drove off, oblivious to Olivia standing 3 rows over, car keys dangling uselessly in her hand. The next morning, she did something she wasn't proud of. She stopped by HR. "Tina, can you pull Malik Carter's emergency contacts for me?" she asked as casually as she could. Just in case, for the file. There was only one number listed for emergencies. St. Catherine's long-term care facility. Olivia spent her lunch break alone in her office, laptop open, pulling up the facility's website. St. Catherine's specialized in patients with severe brain injuries, comas, and persistent vegetative states. Round-the-clock care for people who couldn't care for themselves. People whose families refused to give up hope. Her hands trembled as she closed the browser. Malik had someone there. Someone he called on the way over to ask if she was comfortable. Someone he visited every single day. Who was she? That Friday, the company hosted its monthly happy hour at a downtown bar. Olivia showed up because, as CFO, she didn't have the luxury of skipping. She nursed a glass of wine while making small talk with department heads who tried a little too hard to impress her. Malik, predictably, was not there. $5 says he's got a secret girlfriend, Tina announced near the pool table. No man that good-looking stays single for 4 years without a reason. Or maybe he's just weird, someone else chimed in. Ever notice how he never talks about his life? It's like he doesn't exist outside this office. Olivia said nothing. She knew more than they did now, but the knowledge sat heavy in her chest. It didn't feel like gossip material. It felt like something sacred she'd stumbled into by accident. That weekend, Malik and Amara carried out their usual routine. Amara spent Saturday morning at the kitchen table, tongue sticking out in concentration as she carefully chose crayons. "It's us at the park," she announced, holding up the finished drawing. "See, that's you, that's me, and that's Mommy. She's wearing her yellow sundress, the one she wore on my birthday before She trailed off, and Malik studied the picture like it was a priceless painting. In the drawing, all three of them were standing, all three smiling, all three together. "It's beautiful, baby," he said softly. "Let's go show her." They taped the picture on the wall beside Janelle's bed, joining dozens of others that formed a handmade gallery. Holidays, first days of school, rainy afternoons in the living room, a life drawn in crayon for a mother who had missed every single moment, and yet, through Amara's stubborn love, hadn't missed them completely. "Do you think she sees them?" Amara asked, wrapping her small brown fingers around her mother's still hand. Malik knelt beside his daughter, eyes fixed on his wife's peaceful face. "I think she feels them," he said quietly, "and that's enough." He needed it to be true. The alternative was unbearable. The annual charity gala was Brennan and Associates' crown jewel. Major clients came, potential investors hovered. The firm's reputation was polished and displayed under the chandeliers. Olivia needed Malik there. He was the only analyst who knew the firm's investment portfolios deeply enough to field the inevitable barrage of technical questions from wealthy clients. She called him into her office. "The Hartwell Foundation Gala is next Saturday evening," she said, businesslike. "I need you there." His expression didn't change, but something in his posture tightened. "I have commitments," he replied. "Reschedule them." "I can't." Frustration prickled under her skin. She wasn't used to employees pushing back, especially not when their careers depended on her evaluation. "Mr. Carter, this isn't optional." "Then I'm sorry," he said calmly, "but I still won't be able to attend." They stared at each other across her desk, neither blinking first. Finally, Olivia heard herself ask, "You have commitments every evening, every single evening?" Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or the momentary shock of realizing someone had finally seen past the surface. "Yes, Miss Brennan," he answered. "Every single one." She sat back, thinking, the analyst who never networked, the man who always left at 5:30, the visitor in room 217. "What if I moved the gala to Saturday afternoon?" she asked slowly. Would that work?" Malik actually blinked. In 4 years at the firm, no one had ever shifted a schedule for him. No one had ever asked what might make life easier instead of simply demanding he fall in line. "You'd do that?" he asked. "I need you there," she said, forcing her tone to stay cool, even as something softer curled at the edges. "And you clearly have somewhere to be in the evenings. This seems like a reasonable compromise. I'll move the start time to 2 o'clock, but I need you there until at least 4:45. He considered for a long moment. 4:45, he said at last, no later. Done. The gala was a success by every metric that could be charted on a spreadsheet. Malik arrived in a dark suit that transformed him. Without his usual office uniform, he looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Tall, self-contained, the deep brown of his skin contrasting sharply with his crisp white shirt. Confident in a way that his quiet workday demeanor only hinted at. He charmed clients, translated dense financial jargon into human language, and answered every technical question with effortless precision. He carried himself with a quiet authority that Olivia found herself watching more than she should. At 4:43, he approached her by the dessert table. Miss Brennan, he said, thank you for making the adjustment. I need to leave now. She nodded, surprised at the small ache his words left. Of course, you've done more than enough. He was gone before the clock hit 4:45. A silver-haired investor ambled over, champagne glass in hand. Your best guy just left, he remarked. Everything all right? Olivia watched the door swing closed behind Malik. He has somewhere more important to be, she said before she could stop herself. She had never called anything more important than work in her life. She started to see things she'd been too busy to notice before. She saw that Malik always took the stairs instead of the elevator, like a man who saved his emotional energy for the places it really mattered. She noticed the small silver watch he kept in his desk drawer, a delicate women's watch, old-fashioned, clearly cherished, that he sometimes held but never wore. She noticed that when he did smile, the expression transformed his whole face, making him look years younger, softer, almost boyish. She wondered who he had been before life had carved those quiet lines of sorrow around his mouth. The answers came in pieces. Piece one showed up when Malik called in sick one Thursday morning. It was the first unplanned absence in 4 years. When he came back the next day, a coworker joked, "Enjoy your day off?" "My daughter was sick," Malik replied simply. "She's better now." Daughter. Olivia pulled his file again, something she was doing far more often than she liked. Emergency contact number 2, Amara Carter, age 8, listed with a phone number for an elementary school. No mother anywhere on the forms. Piece 2 arrived later that week. Malik had stepped away from his desk, and Olivia, walking past, caught sight of the open drawer. The silver watch lay inside. Up close, she could see it clearly now. A woman's watch, delicate, slightly scratched, the kind of thing passed from mother to daughter. She pictured it on a slim brown wrist, a wife's wrist, a mother's. Piece 3 came on the night she worked late. At 6 o'clock, she glanced out her window and noticed Malik's car still sitting in its usual spot. That never happened. He was always gone by 5:35. On impulse, she headed down, telling herself she just needed fresh air. His car was there. Through the windshield, she saw him sitting in the driver's seat, forehead resting lightly against the steering wheel. He wasn't asleep. He wasn't on his phone. He was just still, alone in the dim light of the parking lot, holding himself together in the only private space he had between the office and the life that waited for him. Olivia raised her hand, thinking about tapping on the glass. Then she let it fall. This wasn't hers to interrupt. Whatever weight he carried, he hadn't invited her to shoulder it. She went back upstairs, but the image stayed with her. A good man alone in a car, mustering the strength to walk into another room and keep a promise no one else could see. Across town that night, Malik sat in room 217, reading the next chapter to Janelle. Amara, fully recovered, had insisted on coming. She held her mother's hand, occasionally interrupting with commentary about the character's choices that made Malik smile despite himself. "Mommy, I got better," Amara announced, her voice grave with importance. "Daddy took care of me, just like you would have. He made soup and everything, even though he put too much salt in it." "I did not," Malik protested. "You totally did," she countered, grinning. "But I ate it anyway, 'cause you tried hard." He looked from his wife's still face to his daughter's animated one. The two people he loved most in the world. One who couldn't answer him and one who heard everything. "Your mother," he said softly, "would be very proud of you." "I know," Amara said. "I told her already." St. Catherine's didn't appear anywhere on Olivia's calendar. Officially, she was there to discuss charitable donations. The Brennan Foundation needed to pick healthcare nonprofits for the year's grants. Unofficially, she was there because she knew who occupied room 217. The facility director walked her through the building. They toured the physical therapy wing, the family support center, the memorial garden where families came to breathe for a minute. "Our residents are here because someone refused to give up on them," the director explained. "Everyone in this building has at least one person who believes they're still worth fighting for." They turned down the east corridor and Olivia's heart started pounding. Through the narrow window of room 217, she saw Malik sitting by a hospital bed. A woman lay motionless under the covers, chest rising and falling at a machine's steady command. Malik read from a book, his lips moving, his free hand wrapped around hers. Olivia stopped walking. "That's one of our longest cases," the director said, following her gaze. "Traumatic brain injury from a car accident about 4 years ago. Her husband comes every day, rain or shine, weekday or weekend, every single evening." Husband. The word hit Olivia like a punch. Not a mother, not a sister. His wife. "Some families struggle to make it in once a month," the director continued. "But that man, he hasn't missed a single day. Not one day in 4 years. Olivia watched Malik turn a page, utterly unaware of her presence. His face, stripped of office professionalism, was open in a way she'd never seen. This wasn't the quiet analyst from the 12th floor. This was a black single dad who had reordered his entire life around a promise. He didn't lack ambition. He hadn't checked out. He was in love, still, fiercely, stubbornly, with the woman in that bed. Olivia left before the tour finished. She sat in her car and cried for the first time in years. Not delicate, movie-ready tears. Ugly, shaking sobs that clawed their way up from somewhere deep. She was 31. She had never loved anyone the way Malik loved his wife. She wasn't sure she'd ever tried. At every crossroads, she'd chosen the job, promotions instead of people, late nights at the office instead of dinners, another line on her resume instead of another chance at connection. Malik had walked away from promotions, after-hours networking, and happy hours to sit beside a woman who couldn't open her eyes and a child who refused to let her be forgotten. Sitting in that parking lot, watching the autumn sun bleed out behind the buildings, Olivia realized she'd been measuring her life with the wrong yardstick. The next day, she said nothing to him about what she'd seen. She greeted him the same way. She ran meetings the same way. But now she ended every meeting with him 5 minutes early so he could finish his work without rushing. She stopped scheduling anything that would threaten his 5:30 departures. She started treating that time as non-negotiable. Now she knew that 5:30 wasn't just an exit time. It was a sentence that read, "I love you. I'm coming. I'm not stopping." Some secrets weren't hers to share, but she could honor them quietly in the spaces where respect lived. The Whitmore acquisition meant brutal hours and unforgiving deadlines. Malik and Olivia found themselves side by side more often than not, poring over spreadsheets and scenarios. She made sure they always wrapped by 5:05. "You don't have to do this," he said one afternoon, closing his laptop. "I know it creates more work for you." "Everyone has their priorities, Mr. Carter," Olivia replied. "I'm learning to respect that." Something eased between them. Their conversations slowly stretched beyond balance sheets and forecasts. Olivia talked about the pressure of carrying her family's name, about board members who looked at her like a kid playing dress-up, about the loneliness of knowing people saw Brennan before they saw her. Malik listened. He didn't jump in with advice. He didn't try to fix anything. He just understood. Somehow that felt like a gift. "Do you ever feel like you're running towards something no one else can see?" she asked one evening. "Every day," he said quietly. The almost moment arrived on a Wednesday. Amara's after-school program announced a staff training day, forcing Malik to bring her to the office. Olivia discovered them in the break room, Malik microwaving chicken nuggets while Amara colored at the table, legs swinging. "Miss Brennan, this is my daughter Amara," he said, a note of pride softening his voice. Amara looked up, big, curious eyes taking Olivia in. "You're pretty," she announced bluntly. "Daddy didn't tell me you were pretty." Malik's ears darkened. "Amara, oh what? It's true." Olivia found herself laughing. "Thank you, Amara. What are you drawing?" "A picture for my mom." Amara held up the paper, 3 figures in front of a house. "We're going to put it on her wall with all the others." Olivia glanced at Malik and saw the familiar shadow cross his face. The drawing said more than Amara knew. "It's beautiful," Olivia said softly. "Your mom is lucky to have such a talented artist." "That's what Daddy says too," Amara chirped. Later, when Malik stepped out to grab Amara's jacket from the car, Olivia found herself alone with the girl. "Your dad's a good man," she said quietly. "You're lucky to have him." Amara looked up, suddenly serious in that uncanny way children have when they're about to deliver a truth. "He's the best," she said, "even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Olivia wanted to ask what hard meant, but Malik came back and the moment slipped away. "Are you my dad's friend?" Amara asked as they were leaving. Olivia hesitated. "I think so." Amara nodded. "Good. He needs friends. He doesn't let people in." The words echoed in Olivia's head long after the Carters went home. He doesn't let people in. Now, 6 months later, he stood in her office at 7 p.m., his hand on the door handle, and she had finally blurted out the question that had been burning a hole in her curiosity. "Why won't you date?" Malik didn't sit. He stayed by the door like a man ready to leave at any second and yet choosing not to. "You really want to know?" "Yes," she said. "I do." He was silent for so long she thought he might walk away. Then he spoke, and the weight in his voice seemed to thicken the air between them. "My wife Janelle," he began. 4 years ago, a drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car. She was coming home from her sister's baby shower, 43 minutes from our front door." He paused. "She survived, technically." His jaw worked. "But she never woke up." Olivia's stomach dropped. She had seen the chart at St. Catherine. Hearing it in his voice was different. "The doctors told me she'd never recover," Malik continued. "Persistent vegetative state. They recommended removing life support. Letting her go, they called it. Like she was a balloon I could just Open my hand and release. He looked at Olivia then, and she saw 4 years of grief shimmering behind his calm expression. Her parents agreed with them, he said. They held a memorial service. They mourned her and moved on. A hint of a bitter smile touched his mouth. But I couldn't, because she's still here. She's still breathing. Her heart's still beating, and I made her a promise. What promise? Olivia whispered, though she already knew. In sickness and in health, he said softly, for better or for worse, until death do us part. He spoke the words like a prayer he'd repeated to himself 1,000 times. She hasn't died, Olivia, he said. She's just waiting. And I'm not abandoning her while she waits. Silence stretched between them. Why didn't you let her go? Olivia asked, voice barely audible. Everyone else did. Because she would have waited for me, Malik replied, his voice gentling. If it was me in that bed, Janelle would be there every day reading to me, talking to me, refusing to give up. That's who she is. That's who she still is somewhere inside. He glanced toward this window as if he could somehow see across the city. And Amara needs to know her mother is still here, he added, even if she can't hug her back. Some promises don't have expiration dates. Olivia's eyes stung. Do you still love her? Every day, he answered without hesitation. More than the day I married her. Is that why you don't date? She asked. He finally looked at her fully. In his eyes, she saw a recognition, an understanding that her question carried more layers than the words alone. You asked why I don't date, he said quietly. That's why. To me, it would be cheating. Not legally, not technically, but on the vows I made, it would be a betrayal. And I won't do that to her, not while she's still breathing. The words hung between them like the space between heartbeats. Olivia thought about herself. 31, unmarried, unattached. She thought about how easily she'd walked away from men when they conflicted with her career or her comfort. She thought about how proud she'd been of her independence, how she'd told herself she was too focused, too busy for love. And across from her stood a black single dad who had built his entire life around a woman who couldn't even open her eyes to see him keeping his promise. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking, for every time I thought you were cold, for every time I resented you for leaving early, for every time I assumed you didn't care. You didn't know, he said, and there was no accusation in it. No one does. I prefer it that way. He opened the door, then paused. Thank you for asking, he added, using her first name for the first time. Olivia, most people just assume. They decide I'm strange or antisocial or hiding something ugly. You're the first person in 4 years who actually wanted to know the truth. He stepped into the dark hallway, and just before the door closed, she heard him say, almost to himself, It means more than you know. She stood alone in her office for a long time, staring at the empty doorway, feeling something inside her quietly rearrange itself. That night, Olivia lay awake in her expensive bed in her expensive apartment, staring at the ceiling. Some promises don't have expiration dates. She thought about the woman in room 217 and the man who showed up every day. She thought about the little girl drawing pictures for a mother who might never see them. She thought about her own life, the relationships she'd cut off when they got inconvenient, the feelings she'd shelved for later. She was 31, CFO of a successful company, the daughter of a legend, and she had never loved anyone the way Malik loved his wife. The next morning, she got to the office early, half expecting the world to look different. It didn't. Malik was already at his desk, working through his usual reports. He greeted her with the same professional nod as always. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Olivia stopped pushing him to attend networking events. She stopped dangling promotions he clearly didn't want. She stopped treating 5:30 as an obstacle to be negotiated. Instead, she protected it. When board members grumbled about their best analysts never attending evening events, she met their complaints head on. He has responsibilities, she said simply, more important ones than cocktail parties. She also made a decision she told no one about. She called St. Catherine's and asked for the director. Brennan and Associates would like to make an anonymous donation, she said, specifically to cover long-term care costs for a patient named Janelle Carter. How much? The director asked. Whatever it costs to cover her care for the next 5 years, Olivia replied. Whatever that number is. There was a stunned pause. That's very generous, the director said. May I ask why this patient in particular? Olivia pictured Malik in the parking lot, forehead on the steering wheel. She pictured Amara's drawings taped to the wall. She pictured room 217. Some promises deserve support, she said quietly, even the ones we didn't make ourselves. The following weekend, Malik and Amara made their regular visit. Amara bounced down the corridor, waving a new drawing. This one's different, Daddy. Look. 3 figures stood in the foreground, Malik, Amara, and Janelle. In the background, slightly apart, stood a 4th figure, a woman with dark hair, watching with a small smile. "Who's that?" Malik asked. "The nice lady from your job," Amara said. "The one who asked about you." She squinted at the picture, tilting her head. "She looks lonely, like she's still looking for her people." Something shifted in Malik's chest. They taped the drawing to the wall. "Did you tell her about Mom?" Amara asked. "Yes." "Good." Amara nodded, emphatic. She seems like someone who would understand. On Monday, Malik did something he hadn't done in 4 years. When his team announced they were going out to lunch, he didn't automatically decline. "I can stay for 30 minutes, he said. His co-workers stared like he'd just announced he was quitting to become a rock star. "You're coming? To lunch?" Tina from HR asked. "Willingly?" 30 minutes, Malik repeated. "That's all I can spare." From across the room, Olivia watched him join the group, warmth blooming in her chest. It was such a small thing, a half hour at a sandwich place, but she understood what it meant. He wasn't tearing down his walls, he was cracking a window, letting a little light in. He glanced back over his shoulder before stepping into the elevator. Their eyes met. She thought she saw the faintest hint of a smile. 3 months later, Olivia got a phone call that made her heart stop. It was the director of St. Catherine Essa calling to thank her for the donation that had helped keep the facility afloat during a tough quarter. At the end of the conversation, almost casually, the director added, "You might be interested to know about one of our long-term patients, Janelle Carter. She showed signs of responsiveness last week for the first time since admission." Olivia's breath caught. "What kind of signs?" she asked. Her husband was reading to her, the director said. She squeezed his hand, not a reflex, a purposeful squeeze. Her doctors are cautiously optimistic. Olivia thanked her and hung up. She sat perfectly still for a long time, thinking about Malik reading that same book, month after month, year after year, waiting for exactly that moment. She didn't tell him she knew. She didn't need to. That evening, in room 217, the Carter family gathered as if the word future had quietly drifted back into the room. Amara curled up on one side of the bed, small fingers tangled with her mother's. Malik sat on the other, reading from the same battered paperback. His voice was steady, but his free hand shook. "And they lived," he read. "Not happily ever after, because that's not how real life works. But they lived together, and that was enough." He closed the book and looked at Janelle's face. Her eyelids fluttered, just barely. Her fingers twitched in his grasp. "Take your time," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere. I never went anywhere. I'll be here when you're ready." Amara scooted closer, laying her head gently on her mother's shoulder. The nurses usually discouraged that, but tonight no one said a word. "We'll wait, Mommy," she murmured. "However long it takes. That's what Daddy always says. Some promises don't have expiration dates." Outside the room, unseen, Olivia stood watching through the small window. She held a simple bouquet from the gift shop downstairs. She didn't go in. Instead, she left the flowers at the nurse's station with a note. "For Janelle Carter, room 217. She lingered another moment, watching the man who had taught her what love looked like when it wasn't convenient, wasn't easy, and wasn't being returned in any of the usual ways. Malik looked up suddenly, as if he could feel her gaze through the glass. Their eyes met. Olivia lifted her hand in a small wave, then turned and walked down the corridor. She didn't look back. Some things didn't need words. Some connections existed in the quiet understanding between two people who had both decided in different ways to stop measuring their lives by promotions and titles alone. Malik watched her go, his hand still wrapped around his wife's fingers. He didn't follow. She didn't expect him to. When Olivia stepped into the cool evening air outside St. Catherine, she realized she was smiling. She had come looking for something she couldn't name, a reason to believe that real love still existed in a world obsessed with convenience. She'd found it in a hospital room where a black single dad read chapters aloud to a woman who might never open her eyes again. She'd found it in a little girl's drawings, in a silver watch tucked in a desk drawer, in 5:30 departures that weren't laziness, but sacred appointments with devotion. She'd found it, and now she knew what she was looking for in her own life. Not success, not power, not just a corner office with her name on the door. She wanted someone who would show up, someone who would sit beside her when everything fell apart, someone for whom "until death do us part" wasn't just a line in a ceremony. She drove home through the darkening streets of Chicago. Somewhere across town, Malik was reading another chapter to Janelle. Amara was drawing another picture for the gallery on the wall. And in room 217 at St. Catherine's long-term care facility, Janelle Carter's fingers twitched again around the hand of the man who had never stopped believing she would find her way back to him. Sometimes that was enough.